Thank you. I'll now recognize myself for 5 minutes. I mentioned in my opening statement that establishing cyber confidence building measures with our allies and friends in Asia is critically important. There's been much discussion, mostly negative, about creating a global treaty and that this goal is impractical and unenforceable. The large number of actors and new and fast-changing technology in cyberspace increases the complexity of collaborating to resolve issues domestically and internationally in a timely manner. Because of the cross nature of cybersecurity, different countries in Asia have different interests concerning privacy, openness, and the regulation of cyberspace, vastly different in some cases. As a result, what's the best way to go about establishing greater trust and confidence? And while many efforts to enhance cooperation have taken a bilateral approach, what form would you see cyber cooperation in Asia taking in the future? And how much influence does the U.S. have in actually building capacity and security in cyberspace? And lastly, how do you think broad security concerns about revealing intelligence sources and methods will prevent cooperation from advancing, especially considering China's growing presence and aggressiveness in the region? And I'll just go down the line and ask each of you to take a relatively brief shot at that question. And I guess Dr. Schneck, will begin with you.
So thank you very much. When it comes to how much influence the U.S. has in building that cooperation, I look at cybersecurity as cyber resilience. How do you keep our networks up while they're being attacked? They will always be attacked. And right now we're setting, I think, a beautiful example in the U.S. with the work that's being done by NIST and with the Department of Homeland Security and across the interagency in combining information in people time and in machine time. So building ways, and we need liability protections, of course, for companies to share information in good faith about cyber threat, but also building ways for people to get together across, transcending those boundaries between competition and companies, as well as transcending private sector and industry boundaries. And then in machine time, the Department of Homeland Security is actually crafting protocols to build that internet ecosystem that I mentioned, which would allow cyber threat indicators. If you see something behaviorally strange or off, computers could communicate to other computers around the internet, just as your body communicates and fights a disease without knowing its name, so that you build an ecosystem that's learning where an adversary is trying to attack before it propagates so much that causes damage. And I think that the U.S., between our academic institutions, our industry, and our government, is doing a very good example at taking the first couple of steps at building that framework to foster global innovation instead of regulation, which is always so many years behind. And we're also setting a great example working with many in the Asia-Pacific community, many in the EU, to really build those protocols, because the competitor is not the adversary anymore in industry. Government's not an adversary. Other countries are not adversaries necessarily. It's all about how we keep these networks up to sustain our way of life. And to wrap that part of your question, I think the U.S. is doing a beautiful job in that way, and we have a lot of work to do globally on that.
Okay. Can I stop you there?
Sure.
So I give the others?
Sorry.
I have about a minute and a half left, so I'll give you about 45 seconds, Dr. Lewis, and then about 45 to Mr. Rauscher.
Okay. I should note that for the last 3 years, I've led semi-formal talks with the Chinese government, with the Ministry of State Security and the PLA. State was able to go to them along with DOD. And what we found in those talks is that a global treaty just isn't possible. One warning is the Russians are the guys proposing a global treaty. That alone should be enough to tell us it's a bad idea. There's a meeting coming up in Korea this October that is part of a process begun by the UK to get agreement on norms and confidence-building measures. We're not going to get a treaty. We can get agreement on norms and confidence-building measures. And the U.S. is a leader in this.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rauscher?
Yes, I think there's several opportunities that are ripe for the picking. The first deals with the underpinning of cyberspace, how we're connected between North America and the major financial center, Hong Kong, and China. And that's through undersea cables that all come together underneath in the Luzon Strait. And that's a choke point. A recommendation in this Riguchi report suggests that we need geographic physical diversity and a route around the west side of Taiwan very sensitive waters that would land in North America would bring great stability to our two economies. This is really something that needs to be done. The Chinese need to make a step where they would give assurances to investors, but North America needs to make it clear places like the United States is a place a cable like that can land. Another great opportunity for a confidence-building measure is to implement priority international communications. This is a capability at a national level that was critical for us, but we do not have an extension of that internationally. We are increasingly dependent on each other, and yet we cannot communicate in a crisis like Fukushima or 9/11 because there is massive congestion in networks, particularly internationally. This is a great opportunity. I think there's other opportunities and areas that we're exploring. Perhaps I'll have a chance to address that later in the hearing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'll now recognize the ranking member, the gentleman from American Samoa, Mr. Inifeilima Vega.
Thank you.